I never thought a simple Thursday night could shred me into pieces. Yet here I was, staring at Mason Hart, the guy I'd loved for 3 years, as he announced he was marrying someone else like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I guess that's that, Mason said, tapping his hand nervously on the edge of the coffee shop table. The words weren't loud, but they hit me harder than a freight train. I laughed bitterly, unexpectedly. You mean like this has been some kind of casual decision? Just poof, someone else, and my entire world flips upside down. My voice cracked at the last word. He avoided my eyes. Fiddling with the ring on his finger. My heart sank a little further. It's not like that. I didn't know how to tell you. I blinked at him, trying to process what I just heard. Not like that? Mason, you're telling me you're about to marry her. And somehow it's not like that. He flinched at my tone. I didn't plan it. I didn't know. I just thought. His voice broke. And for the first time in months, Mason didn't sound like the confident, untouchable alpha I'd fallen for. He sounded small, lost, and scared. And that scared me more than the idea of losing him ever could. The past few weeks had been a blur. Mason had been distant, consumed with work and strange smiles he never shared with me. I told myself it was normal busy schedules, career moves, but now I realized he was slipping away. And I had been blind. I stood up abruptly. You know what? Fine. Go marry her. Enjoy the perfect life you've clearly been planning behind my back. My hands shook, and I forced a laugh that tasted like smoke and regret. I guess this is goodbye, Mason. But as I turned to leave, something in his posture changed. His eyes widened not with anger or guilt, but sheer panic. Wait, don't go, he blurted out, standing so quickly he knocked over his coffee cup. The liquid spilled across the table, steaming against the dim light of the cafe, unnoticed in our storm of emotion. I froze, my back still to him, heart hammering. Don't go, I repeated, my voice softening despite myself. Yes, too mean, no. I shouldn't have said anything. I can't. I can't do this without you. His voice cracked, trembling, and I felt my anger and grief twist into confusion. I spun around to face him fully. His usually pristine hair was damp from the rain outside. His suit looked rumpled, as though he'd been wrestling with invisible demons all day. His hands were shaking. Mason Hart, the guy who could command a room with a glance, was trembling in front of me. And in that moment, I realized something dangerous. I still loved him. Flashback to our first meeting. I remember the awkwardness of it vividly. I had tripped over my own feet in the college library, sending a pile of books tumbling to the floor. Mason had bent down, helping me gather them, a small smirk tugging at his lips. You're a mess, he'd said, teasing but not cruelly. His brown eyes had caught mine in a way that made my chest seize. And you're a distraction? I'd muttered, not knowing at the time that those words would somehow define the next 3 years of my life. We had been impossible togatherm, cautious and guarded. Mason bold and unafraid. But our differences somehow had been the glue. He made me laugh when I wanted to cry, and I grounded him when his own arrogance threatened to consume him. We were reckless and fragile all at once, and I thought we were safe. Now, facing him in the rain-slicked streets outside the cafe, I realized nothing had prepared me for this moment. Mason's panic was tangible. I could almost taste it, metallic and sharp, mingled with the faint scent of his cologne. I didn't mean it, he said again, stepping closer, ignoring the wet puddles soaking his shoes. You don't want to marry her. I never wanted to. I thought I had to. I didn't know how to fix things with you, so Stop. I raised a hand, though my voice trembled. Stop lying to yourself, Mason. You don't get to panic now. You made a choice, one that wasn't mean. I am done waiting for you to figure it out. He shook his head violently, the rain dripping from his hair like tiny silver bullets. No, you don't understand. I didn't make a choice. I didn't. I can't lose you. I can't. For the first time in years, Mason Hart looked like he could break at any second. Vulnerable, human, and my heart refused to obey reason. I loved you, I whispered, stepping closer despite myself, letting the rain soak through my hoodie. I still love you, but you hurt me, Mason. You can't just announce a wedding like it's nothing and expect me to stay. He reached for my hands, trembling. I wasn't thinking straight. I was scared. Scared of losing you before I even had a chance to fight for you. Please, give me a chance to make it right. I wanted to pull away. My pride screamed at me to leave, to protect myself from more heartbreak. But looking into his eyes, seeing the raw desperation there, I found myself stepping closer instead, the distance between us closing with every heartbeat. You really think you can fix this? I asked, my voice barely audible over the patter of rain. I don't just think it, he said. I know it, but you have to let me try. The city around us seemed to vanish, the neon lights, the traffic, the wet concrete all fading into a blur as if the world had decided that, for this one moment, nothing existed except Mason Hart and me. I didn't answer. I just stared, and for once, he didn't look invincible. He looked like he needed me, and, against every warning my heart shouted, I realized I needed him too. We ended up walking together. No words, just the quiet sound of rain and the occasional distant honk of a taxi. Mason didn't let go of my hand once, though I didn't know whether to find it comforting or terrifying. You're shaking, I finally said, glancing down at his hands. I can't help it, he admitted. I thought I'd lost you forever. I don't want to imagine a life without you. The vulnerability in his voice, the openness, it was a shock to my system. Mason, who had always been so guarded, so alpha, was laid bare before me, and I wanted to protect him. I wanted to hold him and never let him go. Then don't, I said softly. Don't make me fight for something that should be ours. His smile was shaky, uncertain, but it reached his eyes. I won't, he whispered. I promise. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I allowed myself to believe him. Rain turned into a drizzle, and by the time we reached the small park near my apartment, the world had softened around us. Lights reflected off puddles like tiny stars, and Mason finally let go of my hand, only to tug me closer into a protective, trembling hug. You're still angry, he murmured against my hair. Of course I am, I said, letting a single tear escape, falling into the collar of his suit. But I can't stay mad when you look like this. I'll spend every day trying to make it up to you, he promised. I don't care how long it takes. I don't want to lose you again. I pulled back just enough to look at him, my heart hammering. Then don't. And for the first time, Mason Hart didn't need to be perfect. He only needed to be present. And in that rainy American night, with the city lights blurry around us, that was enough. Mason and I stayed in that small park for what felt like hours. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, leaving the air crisp and smelling faintly of wet asphalt and pine. I finally pulled away from his embrace, resting my forehead against his chest, listening to the rapid thump of his heartbeat beneath my ear. I don't understand, I whispered. How could you even think about marrying her? After everything. Mason ran his hand through his damp hair, sighing deeply. I was scared, Alex. Scared of losing you, scared of failing myself. I thought if I didn't have a plan, if I didn't do something fast, I'd lose you anyway. And then I realized I was doing it all wrong. I was trying to protect myself from pain, but all I did was hurt you. The sincerity in his voice made my chest ache. I had loved him fiercely for years, and seeing him so vulnerable, so utterly human, stirred feelings I hadn't expected to confront tonight. I nearly left you, I admitted, my voice breaking. I wanted to walk away and never look back. But then, I hesitated, swallowing hard. Then I saw you, panicked, terrified, and I realized I couldn't leave you, not like that. Mason tilted my chin up with his fingers, forcing me to meet his gaze. Alex, I know I don't deserve a second chance, not yet, but I'll spend every day proving that you're the only one I want. I swear, I won't make the same mistake twice. I searched his eyes, looking for deceit, for the slightest hint of manipulation, but all I found was truth and desperation. My heart, stubborn and foolish, began to forgive. "All right," I finally said, my voice trembling. "But it won't be easy. You've got to earn my trust back." Mason's relief was almost palpable. He nodded, pulling me into another tight hug. "I will. I promise." The next few days were a mixture of awkward conversations, small apologies, and tentative gestures of affection. Mason refused to leave my side, and I couldn't deny the comfort of his presence. But trust is not rebuilt overnight, and I reminded myself constantly that while his panic had been genuine, it didn't erase the hurt. We met at the little cafe where the whole debacle began. Mason arrived early, nervously tapping his fingers on the tabletop. His hair was slightly damp from the drizzle outside, and his usual alpha confidence seemed replaced by anxious anticipation. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hey," he replied softly, voice almost pleading. "I brought coffee. Your favorite hazelnut, extra cream." I arched an eyebrow. "Trying to bribe me with caffeine now?" He chuckled nervously. "Maybe. I want to start fixing things." For the next hour, we talked. Not about the wedding announcement, not about her, but about our past fights, the small moments that mattered, the laughter we shared. Mason listened intently, nodding, absorbing every word as though my thoughts were fragile glass he had to handle carefully. "You remember that time we got lost hiking?" I asked, a small smile tugging at my lips. "And you insisted you knew the way even though we ended up trespassing on that private ranch?" He laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "Yeah, and we ran from the owner with my backpack full of snacks bouncing around like a cannonball. I almost lost you that day too." "You didn't," I said quietly. "You never do, Mason. Even when you're reckless, you find your way back." His eyes softened, the intensity of his alpha aura replaced by something tender. "I'll always find my way back to you, Alex. No matter what." Weeks passed, and slowly, the tension between us began to ease. Mason kept his promise. Small gestures, heartfelt apologies, and unwavering honesty became our new rhythm. Yet, there were moments when doubt crept in. One evening, we walked along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting off the calm river. The air smelled faintly of salt and rain, and the distant hum of traffic was soothing. Mason held my hand, but I felt the tension of weeks spent rebuilding trust still lingering in my chest. "Are you sure about this?" I asked quietly, breaking the silence. "About what?" he replied, glancing down at me. "This. Everything. You promised you wouldn't hurt me again, but I need to know you mean it. I need to believe it." Mason stopped walking, turning to face me. The streetlights caught the damp strands of his hair, casting a halo around his face. "Alex, I don't just mean it. I feel it. Losing you was like the world stopped spinning for me. I never want to feel that again. I can't. You're the only one who matters." I searched his eyes, looking for the old alpha confidence, the arrogance that sometimes drove me insane, but also the man I loved fiercely. What I saw instead was vulnerability and determination, a willingness to fight for us no matter how long it took. I want to believe you," I whispered, "but it'll take time." He nodded solemnly. "I'll wait, as long as it takes." Rebuilding trust meant more than words. Mason proved himself in countless ways. Showing up without being asked, listening when I needed to vent, defending me silently when people doubted me, and never slipping back into old patterns of recklessness. One afternoon, while we were working on a small art project in my apartment, Mason's phone buzzed. I saw the caller. Edith was her. My chest tightened instinctively, but Mason glanced at it and immediately set the phone aside, ignoring it. "Not going to answer?" I asked, curious and wary. He shook his head. "Not important. You're important. You always come first now, Alex." The words warmed me in ways I didn't expect. That day, I realized I wasn't just forgiving him, I was choosing him, fully, without hesitation. Our relationship slowly began to resemble the partnership we'd always dreamed of. Playful, supportive, passionate. Mason became protective, not possessive, loving, not demanding. And I, in turn, allowed myself to be vulnerable, trusting him with my fears, my insecurities, and my heart. One chilly evening, Mason surprised me with a picnic on the rooftop of his apartment building. The city stretched out beneath us, a tapestry of glowing lights, humming with life. He'd strung fairy lights around the railing and brought blankets, snacks, and a small bottle of wine. "I wanted to make this special," he said, nervously adjusting the blanket beneath us. "A fresh start. A place where it's just us, without all the chaos." I smiled, my heart swelling. "It is perfect." He reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers. "Alex, I know I can't erase the past, but I want to write the future with you. Every laugh, every fight, every quiet moment. I want it all with you." Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't look away. "Then let's write it together." As the weeks turned into months, our love deepened. Mason no longer had the sharp edges of fear and uncertainty. He was softer, kinder, yet still undeniably alpha man I could admire and love without reservation. We celebrated small victories. Anniversaries, promotions, lazy Sundays curled up on the couch, spontaneous trips to the countryside. Mason often teased me, and I teased back, laughter flowing freely between us, carrying away the shadows of the past. One night, as we walked home under a sky streaked with neon lights and drizzle, Mason stopped, pulling me close. His hands cupped my face, eyes searching mine for any doubt. "I need to ask you something," he said, voice trembling slightly despite the strength in his gaze. I held my breath, heart hammering. "What is it?" He dropped to one knee, the wet pavement reflecting the city lights like stars beneath us. "Alex, I can't promise perfection, but I promise every day I'll choose you, fight for you, love you like it's the only thing that matters. Will you marry me?" Shock, joy, and disbelief collided in my chest. The world seemed to pause, the neon lights, the drizzle, the distant hum of traffic all fading into a blur around us. "Yes," I whispered, tears spilling freely now. "Yes, Mason. I will." Mason pulled me up into a fierce, shaking embrace, and we held each other as the city watched silently around us. The panic, the heartbreak, the fear, it all melted away, leaving only love, fierce and unwavering. We celebrated our engagement quietly, surrounded by friends who had watched our tumultuous love story unfold. Mason never took my trust for granted again. He cherished it, nurturing it with patience and devotion. On the night of our engagement, standing on his rooftop once more, I realized that we had survived the storm not by avoiding pain, but by facing it together. Mason's panicked confession, the moment that nearly tore us apart, had ultimately brought us closer, teaching us the depth of our love and the power of vulnerability. And as we watched the city lights flicker beneath us, rain now gone, I rested my head on Mason's shoulder and whispered, "We're finally home, aren't we?" He kissed the top of my head, his lips warm against my hair. "Yes, home is wherever you are, Alex. Always." Our story wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was ours. And in that truth, we found happiness, laughter, and a love that would withstand anything, even the storms we never saw coming. The future stretched before us, bright and uncertain. But I knew one thing. We would face it together, hearts entwined, inseparable, unbreakable. And for the first time in years, I felt truly, undeniably safe. The months following our engagement were a mixture of preparation, excitement, and quiet moments that reminded us why we had fought so hard for each other. Mason and I became nearly inseparable, moving into a shared apartment with a skyline view of the city we loved and the streets that had seen our heartbreak, our panic, and now our laughter. Even in the chaos of wedding planning, Mason never lost sight of what mattered most. He refused to let anything, not even the pressures of family and tradition, overshadow the intimacy we had rebuilt. One evening, while sorting through invitations at our kitchen table, Mason looked up at me, his brown eyes soft with warmth. "Do you remember that Thursday night?" he asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. I raised an eyebrow, smiling faintly. How could I forget? The night you nearly ruined your life and mine by announcing your engagement to someone else. He chuckled, shaking his head. Yeah, I was a mess. But I also realized something. I realized that I couldn't let fear dictate my life anymore. I couldn't hide from what mattered. I set down the stack of invitations and reached for his hand. You didn't hide from it, Mason. You fought for us. And that's why we're here now. He squeezed my hand tightly, a silent promise passing between us. Wedding day arrived with the kind of calm that belied the intensity of our journey. The small chapel we chose overlooked a serene lake on the outskirts of the city, the water shimmering like molten silver in the early evening light. Guests murmured softly, taking in the beauty of the scene, but all I could focus on was Mason. He looked impossibly handsome in a tailored navy suit, his hair neatly combed, the familiar confidence softened by a gentleness reserved only for me. He turned as I walked down the aisle, and in that moment, the world around us fell away. The past, the heartbreak, the panic, the tears dissolved into a memory, leaving only the two of us, heart to heart. Mason Hart, I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. From the moment we met, you've been my anchor and my storm. You've challenged me, scared me, made me laugh, and taught me the meaning of love in ways I never imagined. I choose you. Every day, in every way, I choose you. His hands trembled slightly as he took mine, eyes glistening. Alex Rivers, you are my heart, my home, and my reason. I lost sight of that once, but I've never stopped loving you. I promise to spend every day proving that my love for you is unwavering. I choose you too always. We sealed our vows with a kiss, the lake reflecting the twilight sky like a dream, and for the first time, I truly believed in the possibility of a love that could survive anything. Life after the wedding wasn't perfect, no love story ever is, but it was ours. We learned to navigate disagreements with patience, to celebrate victories with humility, and to cherish quiet moments as much as grand gestures. Mason had become not just my partner but my best friend, the person whose presence made every ordinary day extraordinary. One rainy afternoon, reminiscent of the night we nearly lost each other, we found ourselves walking hand in hand along the city streets. The neon lights reflected in puddles, casting colorful patterns across the pavement, and the air smelled faintly of rain and asphalt. Do you ever think about that night? I asked, a teasing lilt in my voice. Mason laughed softly. How could I forget? I was panicking, terrified, and nearly ruined everything. Honestly, I think about it every time I see a spilled coffee cup. I smiled, shaking my head. You were a mess. He looked down at me, eyes warm and teasing. And yet, here we are. Married, happy, and I'd still fight through that mess 1,000 times just to keep you. I felt my heart swell, the kind of full, profound joy that only comes from knowing someone loves you wholly, without reservation. We settled into routines that were both ordinary and extraordinary: lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes and coffee, spontaneous road trips to the countryside, evenings spent reading or talking about everything and nothing. Mason had learned to communicate openly, to express vulnerability without fear, and I had learned to trust fully, letting go of the ghosts of doubt and heartbreak. One night, sitting on our balcony with the city skyline stretching before us, Mason rested his head on my shoulder. Alex, he said softly, do you ever think about what our lives would have been like if that Thursday night hadn't happened? I chuckled, remembering the panic, the betrayal, the heartbreak. Honestly, I'm not sure I want to. That night terrified me, Mason, but it also brought us here. It made me realize just how much I love you and how much I needed you in my life. He turned his head to kiss my temple, a gentle, lingering touch that spoke volumes. I don't want to imagine a life without you, and I won't. I promise, no matter what comes, I'll always fight for us. And I'll always choose you, I whispered, leaning into him, feeling the warmth of his presence settle into my bones like a homecoming. Over time, our love continued to deepen. Mason's alpha nature, once a source of tension, became a steadying confidence tempered by empathy and a fierce devotion to our relationship. I, in turn, brought balance, patience, and a quiet strength that grounded us both. We celebrated anniversaries, milestones, and ordinary days alike, finding joy in the rhythm of our shared life. Mason never took my trust for granted, and I never doubted his love. We had been through the storm, and we had emerged stronger, bound by a love that had been tested and had endured. One evening, several years into our marriage, we sat by the lake where we had exchanged vows. The water shimmered under the moonlight, and the air was crisp with the scent of autumn leaves. Mason took my hand, his eyes reflecting the same intensity and warmth I had fallen in love with all those years ago. "Alex," he said, his voice low and intimate, "do you remember the first time I told you I loved you?" I smiled, leaning my head against his shoulder. "How could I forget? You were panicking, stumbling over your words, and I nearly walked away in frustration." He laughed, a deep, heartfelt sound that resonated through the quiet night. "And yet you stayed. You chose to see past my mistakes, past my fear, and love me anyway. You gave me a second chance I didn't deserve, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I honor that choice." I kissed his hand, feeling the weight of our journey, the heartbreak, the panic, the reconciliation, and the unwavering love that had carried us through it all. "And I'll spend mine loving you. No regrets, no doubts. Just us." Mason pulled me close, and we watched the moonlight dance across the water, silent in our shared contentment. In that moment, I realized something profound. Love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about choosing each other every day, through fear and heartbreak and uncertainty, and never letting go. Years later, our life together had grown rich with memories, laughter, and quiet moments of intimacy. Mason and I often reminisced about the night that nearly tore us apart, smiling at the panic and desperation that had ultimately reminded us of what truly mattered. We had built a life together, grounded in trust, vulnerability, and a love that had survived storms no one else could see. And through it all, I learned that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with heartbreak, are tested by fear, and flourish in the tender moments that follow. One Sunday morning, as sunlight poured through our apartment windows, I watched Mason prepare coffee with his usual care, the familiar scent filling the room. He looked up, catching my gaze, and smiled a soft, knowing smile that spoke of years of shared struggles, triumphs, and unwavering devotion. "You know," he said, pouring my cup, "I was terrified once, but I'd do it all again if it meant keeping you in my life." I took the cup, meeting his eyes, feeling the warmth not just from the coffee, but from the man who had loved me through fear, panic, and uncertainty. "And I'd stay," I replied, "through everything, always." He set down his cup, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. "Always," he echoed, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of my head. Outside, the city hummed with life, oblivious to the quiet, profound love story unfolding in our apartment. But inside, everything mattered: every heartbeat, every glance, every whispered promise. We had faced the storm, survived the panic, and found in each other a home that was unshakable, tender, and everlasting. And in that quiet, golden morning light, I knew that love, real, raw, and tested, was the greatest adventure of all. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.